Meanwhile, it seems there could be more trouble brewing in the Joburg City Council. ActionSA was planning a motion of no confidence in Mayor Kabelo Gwamanda for this Thursday. You'll remember, of course, he's from the Al Jamaa party, and he was the candidate put forward by the ANC coalition in Johannesburg. But ActionSA has now decided to temporarily withdraw their planned motion. This after the DA, their partners in the city, refused to support this plan. Let's bring in Michael Beaumont of ActionSA now. Michael, good evening to you. Before we get into this business, Mpopalatse leaving as a councillor for the city of Johannesburg, is this a big loss for the city?
Certainly, I think it is. I think Mpopalatse contributed much in her term as mayor. I think she contributed a lot to the DA as well. And I think certainly it appears to be an ongoing pattern. But I think from our point of view, it was very clear that Mpopalatse was sidelined in the negotiations that could have saved her mayoralty at the beginning of this year. And when you look at what's gone on and the reason why we've had to withdraw this motion, they could have reinstated a multi-party coalition. Again, it looks like these decisions have been made in the Western Cape or in Cape Town on behalf of the residents of Johannesburg. And it's very hard to see that the announcement on Saturday and the resignation on Monday are disconnected.
What do you think's happened?
Well, if you've got to read between the lines, it's an ongoing pattern where decisions are made in Cape Town from the head office of the DA about the residents of Johannesburg, and their willingness to condemn the residents of Johannesburg to 3 more years of the ANC and the EFF. When you consider the stated intention of this multi-party charter and what brought it into existence, it was to prevent an ANC and EFF government in 2024. We don't have to wait for 2024. There's one in Johannesburg right now. It's not theoretical. It's very real. There are daily consequences of misgovernance taking place in the city of Johannesburg, and the DA has the ability to bring their votes to the table, conclude a deal that brings us to an end, and yet they won't.
You call this a DA ploy. What do you mean?
Well, I think particularly what the DA did is commit to talks on the sidelines of the multi-party charter when they were approached by a variety of parties, including ActionSA. When the talks had to happen last week, they were unavailable, and letters were sent instead that said they were not available to support the motion, they were not available to constitute a government with the PA, and instead they were going to propose an amendment to dissolve the council. Now, the reason we call that a ploy, Sally, is twofold. One, a dissolution of the council requires a 2/3 majority. If the DA is not willing to negotiate with parties to achieve a simple majority of 51, what is the idea about a 2/3 majority now? And the second is, from a legal point of view, the Municipal Structures Act doesn't allow the dissolution of council in the first 2 years of its operation. And we know it's less than 2 years from...
Yeah, so that would only happen in November. So that seems to be what the DA is aiming for. You're saying, well, that's unrealistic. Because they won't get 2/3 to dissolve. But let's focus on this issue, because the party in the middle of this seems to be the Patriotic Alliance. My understanding is you pretty much got them on side, that they agreed to vote with yourselves in the DA coalition. Why is the DA not happy with that? Have they explained?
Well, let me just say, I mean, the Patriotic Alliance came to the table. They were willing to conclude an arrangement that would have secured Johannesburg, that would have won back Nelson Mandela Bay and Knysna and other hung councils, and a variety of others. So it really was a strong arrangement that was put in place. You know, and I suspect very strongly what this is Western Cape politics playing out. The DA needs the PA to be in coalition with the ANC so they can run a Gevaar campaign in the 2024 elections, which we know is the way the DA wants to run election campaigns. And at the end of the day, it's much easier for them to de-campaign the PA if they can associate them with the ANC than if the PA were working with our coalition. And I think that is why this is the third occasion the PA has been back at the table, willing to restore a coalition in Johannesburg and beyond, and it's the DA kicking them away.
Do you think the issue is that the Democratic Alliance simply doesn't trust the Patriotic Alliance?
It might well be, and I think, let me be clear, I'm not a spokesperson for the PA. The PA has done many things that I certainly wouldn't applaud either. But let's be clear, if trust is the barrier, there won't be too many parties working with one another. If you consider how the DA is acting in this scenario, if trust is the burden we have to meet as parties, we can't work with the DA either. From our point of view, that's not the right approach to take. We have to build trust in this environment, and that means we need to put aside the baggage behind us. When the multi-party charter met and concluded this agreement, one of the things they said is when parties come to us, we will judge them on their forward-looking perspective. We won't use the baggage of the past against them, and an objective assessment will be measured. This was a fundamental failure against that standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's just less than 2 weeks ago, and the people involved in the multi-party charter, DA, ActionSA, Freedom Front Plus, IFP, and others, such good words spoken from that podium, and a sense that the broader goal was in mind. What's happened now in Johannesburg? Is ActionSA really upset about this? I mean, could this really damage the fabric and the structure of that multi-party charter agreement for you?
I think firstly to say the residents of Johannesburg are upset about this. I mean, let's recognise how political parties feel must come second to 6 million people who need to have a mayor who has a real vision for their city and a real constituency that can hold them accountable. That they don't have. From our point of view, we are committed to continue working with these parties that we have joined up with. When we signed that charter, it was never going to be smooth sailing. It was never going to be green lights all the way. So we have to respond, and we have to go back to the table, which we will this Thursday night, and to say to the DA, this is unacceptable, because people often make the mistake of thinking as partners we must be each other's cheerleaders or mbongis. That's not the case. We are here to hold one another accountable and to ensure we deliver in 2024. And when one of our partners doesn't live up to that standard, they need to be called out. And if that's ActionSA one day, let it happen as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, you know, it's an aggressive business and you have to call each other out. You're not going to agree on everything. Where's that line, though? I mean, how close are you to that line of going, you know what, we can't work with the DA. You know, the common criticism is they don't consult, they're arrogant, and they come in and sort of try and take over. How realistic is that criticism from your experience, and how problematic is that?
It is realistic and it is problematic. But I think the one thing ActionSA and our partners are never going to do is to say because the DA does A, B and C, we're going to give up and walk away from a project that's not about the DA, it's about the South African people. We're committed to the South African people. And that means we've got to work with parties that aren't always the best, who don't behave themselves, who don't play the responsible role expected of an anchor tenant in a coalition. And rather than saying we're going to walk out and we're going to cause a national state of dismay when there's a lack of political alternative in our country, we're going to stay and we're going to make sure we guide the DA in terms of how they must operate as a responsible coalition partner.
Has that multi-party charter sort of redlined anyone besides the EFF and the ANC?
Well, I mean, I suppose the DA has always tried to redline the PA. But beyond that, no. There was a very deliberate effort to say outside of the ANC and EFF, we must be willing to build a broad church. It doesn't just have to be parties that think the way we do or look the way we do. It must be a group of parties that disagree on many things, but on a certain set of core priorities and approaches to challenges in our country, we must agree. And there are many political parties that I think do fit within that mould, and many of them are already starting to approach us after those talks.
All right, so your plan for a motion of no confidence against Gwamanda is not going to go ahead on Thursday, but you are talking. So what are you going to go into those discussions? What are you going to say, and what do you hope will come out of it? Are you hoping that the DA is going to turn around and say, all right, let's give the PA another chance?
Well, I hope they're going to give the residents of Joburg another chance, because I think that's the issue at stake. And I think you're right to say that the PA is central to that particular decision, but let's prioritise the residents rather than the political parties for one moment. That'll be the message we send to the DA on Thursday evening. And it's also going to be to say, if you understand that the project that we are trying to do is to build a majority, building confidence in that project is hugely important. There's 27 million South Africans who are disillusioned, and they need to be inspired to come out and vote. That's not going to happen if we allow it to happen in Johannesburg, what's just happened. We need to turn it around. This province is probably the most winnable province of all of them in 2024. Winning back Johannesburg is central to the momentum we need to build, and we're not going to give up on this just because the DA got it wrong.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and keep us posted on what happens on Thursday. Michael Beaumont of ActionSA. Their plans for a motion of no confidence in the Joburg mayor this week scuppered by the Democratic Alliance. Seems they're not too happy with the Patriotic Alliance being part of the solution. We'll keep an eye on that story. But let's move